Welcome, true crime enthusiasts. Today, we embark on a chilling journey into the dark world of baby farm crimes that stained the pages of history. These tragic cases of exploitation and greed expose the depths of human depravity as we uncover the horrifying secrets hidden within the walls of baby farms. This is Claws and Crime Chronicles, and in this episode, we delve into the haunting tales of baby farm crimes that occurred in the past. Baby farms, seemingly places of care for unwanted or illegitimate infants, turned into harrowing chambers of sorrow where innocent lives were subjected to neglect, abuse, and even murder. Margaret Waters, otherwise known as Willis, was an English murderer hanged by executioner William Calcraft on the 11th of October 1870 at Horsemonger Lane Jail, also known as Surrey County Jail in London. Waters drugged and starved the infants in her care and is believed to have killed at least 19 children. Charged with 5 counts of willful murder, as well as neglect and conspiracy, Waters was convicted of murdering an infant named John Walter Cowan. Her sister, Sarah Ellis, was convicted in the same case for obtaining money under false pretenses and sentenced to 18 months hard labor. Margaret Waters was born in 1835 and lived in Brixton. She turned to baby farming in 1864 after the death of her husband to make ends meet. Her husband left her with £300 and that she had done her best to earn an honest living with it, but that she had gradually sunk into bankruptcy and debt. At first, she had received young pregnant women to be confined and had then undertaken the care of their children. For a while, she even took care of 4 children. At this point, she had never done commercials. However, as things kept going downhill, she started babysitting as a business. Eventually, she switched to another career. She looked in the Clerkenwell News and found many advertisements for women who wished to nurse children. She advertises for adoptions, usually £10 sterling a child. When she had a baby and money, she went to another advertiser who arranged for her to nurse babies. Paid 2 weeks in advance, she didn't even bother to ask for the nurse's address, and of course when she left, there was no news of the baby. She gained the difference between 2 weeks' worth of salary and £10 to adopt the child. Even though it was a limited supply, she really needed it. She went to a moneylender whose identity she discloses and took out a £28 loan on her goods from him. He took £14 out of the £28 for expenses, and until the whole £28 was paid to him, he forced her to pay £2 10 shillings a month. He threatened to take all of her possessions whenever she fell a few days short on a payment and would only back off after receiving a fine of 10 shillings. She was so broke when the £28 was returned in this manner that she had to obtain another loan from the moneylender on the same terms. All this took place while she was living at Bournemouth Terrace. At this time, the children were well attended as she could manage, and a doctor was always called in when they fell sick. When the children died, they were properly buried, and she had the undertaker's receipts as evidence. She soon discovered that disposing of the infants in her care was more profitable due to her poverty. It was far simpler to give the infants narcotics, which stifled their appetites and caused them to starve slowly. 5 infants under her care would pass away from diarrhea, wasting, and convulsions. However, Margaret may have killed up to 19 infants, according to suspicions. Due to the prohibitive cost of burial in Victorian Britain, Margaret would then wrap their feeble bodies in brown paper before discarding them on the streets. She walked them out into the streets one at a time, and when she noticed little children playing, she shouted out to one of them, saying, "Oh, I am so exhausted. Hold my child for a while, and here's 6pence to buy something lovely at the candy store." While the young person entered the store, she fled. She thinks that the workhouse was typically where the babies were taken. The boy to whom she offered one was once served so quickly that he left before she had chance to go. As a result, she entered an oyster bar and placed an order. When she did not see the child crying, she noticed him looking up and down with the infant in his arms. As a group of people gathered, a police officer approached, and the boy showed the infant to him. She fled the oyster shop and made it out unscathed as the policeman left with the youngster. It was obvious that some of the people who gave her the kids for adoption were wealthy. The infants were dressed quite nicely. She used to frequently make appointments to meet people at railway stations when a father would present the child to her along with a nurse. Sometimes the kids were handed over to her an hour or even less after birth, sometimes even before they were dressed. She had only been given one of the kids 2 days prior when the cops found them in Brixton. The individuals who presented it to her promised to give her any amount as long as she took excellent care of it, and she received £20 with it. At the age of 38, Margaret was detained and put on trial for the willful murder of John Walter Cowan, Janet Tassie Cowan's 16-year-old illegitimate son. Some half a dozen little infants lay together on a sofa, filthy, starving, and stupefied by laudanum, the arresting police officer observed of his discovery inside Margaret's home. Amelia Dyer, unlike many people in her generation, did not grow up in abject poverty. She was the youngest of 5 children when she was born in the little community of Pyle Marsh, east of Bristol, in 1838. Her parents were master shoemaker Samuel Hobley and Sarah Hobley nee Weymouth. Her mother's typhus-related mental disorder ruined her rather privileged childhood. Amelia had to take care of her mother until she passed away raving in 1848 after seeing her violent outbursts. Amelia spent some time living with her aunt in Bristol after the death of her mother, before beginning an apprenticeship with a corset maker. Her elder brother Thomas received the family shoe company after her father passed away in 1859. At the age of 24, Amelia irrevocably severed ties with at least one of her brothers, James, and moved into accommodations on Bristol's Trinity Street. She married 59-year-old George Thomas there. After getting married to George Thomas, she spent a few years becoming a nurse, which was a laborious job in Victorian times. She discovered that housing young women who were pregnant outside of marriage in her own house was a less taxing way to make a living from a midwife. So dishonest businesses promised to take these young women in and support them through the birth in exchange for a price that ranged from £5 to £80. Their unwanted children would be cared for as nurse children when the mothers left. The farmed-out babies were starved to save money, and to make caring for them less stressful, they were medicated with readily available alcohol and drugs. Godfrey's cordial, often known as the quietness in casual conversation, is a popular laudanum-laced syrup used to put kids to sleep quickly. And if the kid died, that's fine too. Most of them did, eventually. Her own special refinement was to immediately murder the children and take the money instead of letting them starve to death or be neglected. Dyer avoided both the police and the NSPCC inspectors year after year. She was once apprehended after an alarm was raised and a doctor was called to certify that one too many children had died. She was sentenced to 6 months of hard labor in prison instead of being found guilty of manslaughter, an ordeal that nearly devastated her. After that, she went back to raising babies, eventually enlisting the help of her own family. She stopped requesting death certificates from doctors and surreptitiously disposed of the bodies. They regularly changed residences, living in Bristol, Reading, Cardiff, and London, whenever they smelled the police closing in or parents pursuing them and attempting to regain their kids. Only when a bargeman in charge of a cargo moving up the Thames at Reading spotted a brown paper package floating in shallow water close to the bank and hauled it out with a boat hook did a leg and a little human foot emerge. A young child, between 6 and 12 months old, was found dead after a police investigation. Her neck was wrapped in white tape. A railway label from Bristol's Temple Meads station and the hazy shape of handwriting were both on a piece of brown paper. It was only possible to make out Mrs. Thomas and an address in Reading. Police stormed that address 4 days later on April 3rd and were immediately overcome by the smell of human decay even though no body was discovered. However, there was white tape in a sewing basket, and there were bundles of telegrams organizing adoptions, pawn tickets for kids' clothes, advertisement receipts, and letters from moms asking about their children in cabinets. They calculated that at least 20 children had been left in the care of a Mrs. Thomas, later identified as Amelia Dyer, in the preceding few months alone. She was going to run once more, this time to Somerset, when the police arrived just in time. Amelia Dyer appeared in the Old Bailey on May 22, 1896, and admitted to the murder of Doris Marmon. Amelia Dyer's conviction had been made certain by an excessive amount of evidence and testimony, including those of her family, friends, and daughter. Dyer only offered lunacy as a defense. However, the prosecution successfully contended that Dyer's outward signs of mental instability had been a ruse to allay suspicions. Both of her committals were stated to have occurred around the same time that Dyer was worried her crimes could have been discovered. The jury reached a verdict of guilty in just 4.5 minutes. How many more children Amelia Dyer murdered is unknown. However, mothers' questions, the testimony of other witnesses, and materials discovered in Dyer's homes led to many more. The Dyer case generated controversy. She earned the moniker Ogress of Reading. She committed a scandal due to the specifics of what she did. Local authorities now have the authority to regulate baby farms and outlaw abuse thanks to stricter adoption regulations. Newspaper personal ads needed to be carefully examined. Most Canadians will certainly shrug when you ask them who Lila and William Young are. Maybe not in Nova Scotia. They would undoubtedly be well known to the residents of East Chester, Nova Scotia. From the late 1920s through the late 1940s, they were the couple who ran the Ideal Maternity Home. Despite having less than stellar reputations when they both passed away in the 1960s, the full extent of their crimes had not yet been fully uncovered. How many people were victims? The best estimates place the number between 400 and 600 tiny, defenseless, unwanted newborns, countless numbers of infants. William Young and Lila Coolin Young were a devout but ambitious couple. Lila, then 29 years old, earned her degree from the National School of Obstetrics and Midwifery in 1928. William, 30, was a missionary and unordained Seventh-day Adventist minister. In East Chester, Nova Scotia, they jointly opened the Life and Health Sanitarium in a modest cottage. With their small number of patients, they first struggled to make ends meet. However, they then happened onto a niche market. At the time, birth control and abortion were forbidden for Canadian women. Families frequently abandoned and disowned unmarried women who became pregnant. Neither the government nor the society offered them any support. The Ideal Maternity Home and Sanitarium quickly replaced the Life and Health Sanitarium. Women were charged an average of $75 to $300. The Youngs received a consistent supply of unpaid domestic help if the young women were permitted to pay off their debts at home if they lacked the necessary funds. But the Youngs didn't make money in that way. No, selling the infants to American couples vacationing on the coast of Nova Scotia in the summer was where the big money was made. William Young and Lila Young earned money. In the 1920s, babies fetched $1,000 per head. The cost increased to $5,000 each infant in the 1930s. The cost increased to $10,000 per infant in the 1940s. The 4-bedroom sanitarium in a cottage transformed into a 54-bed facility with 14 bathrooms, numerous nurseries, a turret, and no mortgage. The Youngs made at least $3.5 million from the sale of infants between 1937 and 1947. The unadoptables, or infants that were too ill, disabled, ugly, or misshapen to be adopted, did not survive. They perished. They needed more room, and there was no way to profit from them. For them, there was no market. Those adorable, unwanted babies were fed molasses and water. They became sicker, smaller, and weaker. They all passed away within 2 weeks, too. William and Lila Young reduced expenses, particularly those related to cleaning, to save money as well. The babies and new mothers were living in increasingly filthy conditions that were hazardous to their health. On March 4th, 1936, Lila and William Young were charged with 2 counts of manslaughter in connection with the carelessness and unclean conditions that led to Ava Nieforth and her newborn baby's deaths. However, both were freed because the Youngs exploited their knowledge of which well-known citizens had employed their services to advance their cause. This probably contributed to the jury's choice to acquit. The Maternity Boarding House Act was then amended, and the Youngs' application for a license was denied because of the new licensing requirements. In 1945, they were told to stop operating, but they didn't stop and kept working while they appealed. The Youngs were then charged with 3 felonies and fined $150 after being arraigned on 8 counts, including violating the Maternity Boarding House Act and practicing medicine without a license. The Youngs kept running ads for lovely babies for adoption. Lila and William Young were found guilty in 1946 of selling kids to 4 American families unlawfully. They were merely fined $428.90 as their punishment. And so, despite this most recent financial constraint imposed by the court, they carried on conducting business in their own lucrative and fatal style. The Youngs' reputation was now in ruins, and their mercenary, ruthless baby farming empire was revealed for what it was. Finally, the bankrupt and indebted Ideal Maternity Home closed. The Youngs relocated to Quebec after selling their property. The structure burned down in 1962 as it was being transformed into a resort hotel. Just before Christmas in 1962, William Young passed away from cancer. At the age of 70, Lila Young passed away from leukemia in 1967. Ironically, she was buried in the same cemetery where the Butterbox infants had been laid to rest. After keeping quiet for many years, and after the home had closed, handyman Glenn Shatford at last acknowledged that he had personally interred between 100 and 125 infants in a field that belonged to Lila's parents. Their tiny corpses were initially kept in a tool shed, then placed in butterboxes bought from a nearby supermarket. The Butterbox babies were the moniker given to these teeny-tiny victims. The remainder was either cast into the ocean or consumed by fire in the furnace of the Ideal Maternity Home. Miyuki Ishikawa, a Japanese midwife and serial murderer who was born in 1897, had murdered numerous newborns throughout the 1940s with the help of a number of accomplices. Between 85 and 169 people are thought to have been her victims, but the average figure is 103. Given that Miyuki's efforts resulted in a death toll so high that it continues to be unmatched by any other serial killer in Japan, the 4-year sentence she received from the Tokyo High Court when she was finally captured was unusually lenient. In a report from the Children's Rainbow Center, author Kenji Yamamoto described the occurrence as unbelievable and unbearable. Born in Kunitomi, Miyazaki Prefecture, Ishikawa attended the University of Tokyo. Later on, she married Takeshi Ishikawa. There were no offspring born from the marriage. She was a skilled midwife who worked as the hospital director at the Kotobuki Maternity Hospital. In the 1940s, Miyuki Ishikawa's maternity hospital had a lot of newborns, and she found herself in what she thought of as a predicament. She was unable to assist the infants because of a lack of social and charity services, and many of the parents of these infants were destitute and unable to raise their children correctly without financial difficulties. Ishikawa decided to abuse many infants in an attempt to resolve this conundrum, and many of them perished as a direct result of this violence. Although the precise toll is unknown, it is thought that she killed at least 103 newborns. The majority of the other midwives working for the Kotobuki maternity facility quit in disgust over this procedure. Later, she also made an effort to get paid for these deaths. She and her husband Takeshi begged the parents for enormous quantities of cash, telling them that it would be less expensive than the true cost of rearing these unwanted kids. Shiro Nakayama, a doctor who participated in the plot, helped the couple by forging death certificates. They were disregarded by the Shinjuku ward office. On January 12, 1948, 2 police officers from the Waseda police station unintentionally discovered the remains of 5 Ishikawa victims. The 5 babies' autopsies revealed that they had not perished from natural causes. On January 15, 1948, she and Takeshi were taken into custody. She believed that parents were to blame for the victims' deaths because they were abandoned children. Although the general public agreed with the claim, Yuriko Miyamoto attacked them, calling it an instance of prejudice. After additional inquiry, the police discovered over 40 dead bodies at a mortician's home. Later, 30 bodies were found in a shrine. It was challenging for the authorities to pinpoint the precise number of victims due to the huge volume of collected dead bodies and the duration of the murders. As a result, the precise death toll is yet unknown. Her murders were seen by the authorities as crimes of omission. Ishikawa received an 8-year prison term from the Tokyo District Court, while Takeshi and Dr. Shiro Nakayama each received a 4-year sentence. The Tokyo High Court overturned the original verdict and sentenced Ishikawa to 4 years in prison and Takeshi to 2 years in 1952 after the pair filed an appeal. This occurrence is said to be the main catalyst for the Japanese government's decision to start considering legalizing abortion in the country. This incident was believed to have happened for a number of reasons, including an increase in the quantity of unwanted babies born in Japan. The Mother's Body Protection Law and a national certification process for midwives were both established on July 13, 1948. The Eugenic Protection Law in Japan legalized abortion for financial reasons on June 24, 1949. Thank you for joining us on Claws and Crime Chronicles, where we delve into the darkest corners of society to shed light on important issues. Today, we explored the disturbing world of baby farms, a horrifying reality that demands our attention. As we conclude this episode, we want to express our gratitude for your unwavering support and willingness to confront such unsettling topics. By raising awareness and initiating conversations, we can work together to bring about change and protect the most vulnerable among us. Remember, the power to make a difference lies within each and every one of us. We encourage you to educate others, support organizations combating human trafficking and exploitation, and join the fight against these heinous crimes. Please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode as we continue our journey into the depths of the criminal underworld. Together, let us be the voice for the voiceless and strive for a world free from the atrocities we've uncovered. Stay vigilant, stay compassionate, and until next time, this is Claws and Crime Chronicles, signing off.